Hello and welcome again to another lesson, Chess for Beginners, lesson number 10. My name is FM Steve. In today's lesson, we are going to carry on with the openings in chess. Last time, I looked at how to play with white pieces, and I focused mainly with starting with E4 openings. Today, I want to look at how to respond whenever you are playing black. So I'm going to start with the Ruy Lopez. Ruy Lopez is a Spanish opening, and the starting moves are E4, E5, Knight F3, Knight C6, and then Bishop B5. So if you look at it, Ruy Lopez, as we saw, it's the difference is that the difference between Ruy Lopez and the Gioco Piano, which is an Italian opening, is that black kind of put pressure at E5. At Gioco Piano, the bishop will move to C4, and immediately white starts putting pressure at F7 F7 pawn. So the Ruy Lopez, if you look at the second move by black, when black played Knight C6, black was kind of defending the E5 pawn. So by playing Bishop B5, white somehow puts a bit of pressure at E5. So it all depends with how black will proceed. It's always good to understand these openings and what to do whenever you are playing with black. We are going to look at some of the defenses by black. So one of the defense against Ruy Lopez is what we call the classical defense. And in a classical defense, it's a very simple method which allows white to build strong center. So after Bishop B5, black will proceed with Bishop C5. Then white will try to build strong center with C2, C3, Knight F6, and castled. Castled, black also castles, and now white plays D4. That was the idea of playing C3. So you can see white is already building a strong center. Bishop B6, Rook E1, D6, and Bishop G5. This is what is called the classical defense of the Ruy Lopez. White is more building the center, strong center, and all pieces are well developed. And keep note that white is not even intending to trade off his light color bishop, because white may rely on this bishop at some point. The bishop may soon be transferred to the B1 H7 diagonal. So that bishop, when it's transferred to this diagonal, it's going to be a quite powerful bishop aiming at the black's king. So let's look at another defense for black. So after E4, E5, Knight F3, Knight C6, Bishop B5, black also has, black can still play Knight F6 as move number 3. So Knight F6, the aim of Knight F6 is just to develop. This is the so-called the Berlin defense. And it's an old-fashioned system which leaves black safe, but a bit cramped. So let's say after Knight F6, castled, Knight takes E4, D2, D4, bishop e7, queen e2, knight d6, bishop takes knight, uh, d times c6, d times e5, knight b7, knight c3, and castled. So it's a very old-fashioned system for black, the Berlin defense. It's solid, but black looks a bit cramped. White has more options to play. White can now develop the bishop and bring the rooks in open files, and you can see it's uh it's quite interesting, but black is safe. We have another one, the Stainese defense after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. Black can play d6. This is like an ordinary person playing chess. The defender, the defender is put under attack. The pawn is under pressure. We need to do something on this pawn. So d6. Now, of course, white will try to take advantage since the knight is in a pin. White may consider trying to attack it again by advancing this pawn to reach d5. So white will therefore immediately play d4. So d4 and bishop b7. Very, very solid. What's happening is if now black picks, white will pick, and if black advance the pawn, white will just move the knight, and it's solid. Knight c3, knight f6, castled, bishop e7, rook e1, e takes d, knight takes d, and castle. So you can see black has come out of the opening, not so much problem. White has more space, more central control, but black is not in any danger. Now let's look at another one. This is the so-called Stillman defense. Now, Stillman defense, it's a gambit variation in which black sacrifice a pawn for good attacking chances. But where white keeps the advantage with careful play. So let's look at the Stillman defense. The e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. So all these moves, all these defenses, they from move number 3 for black, this is where we get different kind of defenses. So in this one, black plays f5. Now white plays, because black can actually, white can take, and this is why we are saying it's a gambit in which black sacrifices a pawn for a good attacking chances. But white can keep the advantage with careful play. So after f5, white will just play knight c3, f f times e4, knight times e4, b5. knight takes e5, quite interesting. And the idea here is if they pick, white has choices. For example, pick, white has this choice of queen goes check, and if this is played, white still can pick here, and you can see it's a bit interesting. Taking the rook, not so sure whether losing two pieces. Another move is, of course, let's say pick check or pick here, pick knight takes, pawn takes, then bishop takes check. So all these may be very much possible options for white. So these are the most popular methods of defending against Ruy Lopez. The pawn move, there is another one, the pawn move of a6. So e4, knight f3. Then now there is this pawn move, a6. So it's always a very interesting one for black. And if white decides to capture, then black normally captures with the queen's pawn, and still e5 pawn is somehow defended because black will play queen d4, attacks both knight and pawn, and black will regain the pawn. So that's why the a6 move is very popular in Ruy Lopez. Also, you have to keep in mind that rarely white wants to give away the bishop. So after a6, the bishop will probably move to a4. After bishop a4, we want to look at another type of defense arising from a6, and this is the modern Chinese defense. It's a system where black carefully supports e5. The king's knight is developed on e7, leaving f6 free for the f pawn, and allows the knight to go to g6. So the game can proceed d6, c3, bishop d7, d4, knight g e7, castle, and knight g6. So that is the modern Chinese defense. There is still another one, the open defense. Now, the open defense, black tries to capture on e4 and gets free play for his pieces. So after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop d5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castle. Now black will capture, knight takes e4, d4, white is trying to open the central file, and black now plays b5. b5, bishop b3, d6, d5, d takes e, and bishop e6. This is the open defense. We also have the closed defense. The closed defense, after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop d5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castled, bishop e7, rook e1, b5, bishop b3, d6, c3, then castled. So this is the closed defense. We also have the martial attack. And this, in the martial attack, this is very, very interesting line by black. After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castled, bishop e7, rook e1, b5, bishop b3. And now, as opposed to d6 that we saw earlier, as opposed to d6, here black will first castle. When white is about to play c3 with the intention of d4, black now will play d5. And this is the martial attack. Black is giving away the pawn at e5 with a very strong attack. So if now white captures e takes d, black will capture, knight takes, and you can see the e5 pawn looks free. So knight takes it, knight picks, rook picks, and now c6. So if you look at it, at first it may seem like black has just given a free pawn. But what black has achieved something. You can see black has the bishops, and this is now where black wants to build an attack. Black will more likely rely on the bishops. You can see these diagonals. If white is not careful, white will be losing the game very fast. So this is how the game is likely to proceed. After c6, white may play d4, and black now plays bishop d6. And you can see it's very, very dangerous for white. White must know what they are doing. Otherwise, black may end up winning it very fast. Let's now look at other ways on how a game of Ruy Lopez can continue. So after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, because this is the most popular in the Ruy Lopez, the a6 line, knight f6, castled, bishop e7, rook e1, d5, bishop b3, d6. So this is under the closed defense. c3. Remember, white needs this bishop more. So c3, so that the bishop can always retreat to c2. So c3 castled, h3 to prevent bishop pinning the knight, knight a5, and since white needs the bishop comes to c2, c5, and then now d4. Queen c7, knight d2, knight c6, knight f1. This is very typical position from the closed defense to the Ruy Lopez. The maneuvering behind the pawn chain. White wants to place the knight on f1 to go to probably f5 square, from where it will have a strong base to support the kingside attack. Now, black has more space on the queen side and chances of attack, particularly along the c file. That is more about Ruy Lopez. It's a very complex line, very popular with the e4, e5, and it's going to be interesting maybe if you can try it. The other defenses that we may look at are Petrov defense. We have the Filada defense, French defense, Caro-Kann defense, center counter defense, and of course the most popular, the Sicilian defense. So I'm going to leave it at that for this lesson because sometimes combining these openings, it can be very, very challenging and for you to understand them better. So today we were just working on the defense and how to play against the Ruy Lopez. Thank you for your support. This has been FM Steve, and let's continue developing our chess together. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Better Chess. Thank you. I'll see you again for our lesson number 11.